This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. In this show, we'll try to match all of the chaotic energy that 2020 has captured. But for starters, we'll just tell you what we're covering today. The Department of Homeland Security is planning to expand the kind of data it collects from immigrants to improve screening and vetting. We'll tell you why critics say this could negatively affect immigrant populations. Plus, education ain't usually a top issue during presidential campaigns. We'll explain how that's changed this year. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The COVID-19 vaccine race has drawn a lot of scrutiny because of how fast companies have been moving to deliver a vaccine. To try and ease some of those concerns, 9 biopharmaceutical companies released a pledge today promising to uphold high ethical standards. They added they won't seek premature government approval for their vaccine candidates. This comes just a week after the USDA said if the benefits outweighed the risks, they might consider approving a vaccine before phase 3 trials wrapped up. Phase 3 is when scientists give the vaccine to thousands of participants to determine effectiveness and suss out side effects. Critics called the move dangerous. According to the statement, the 9 companies said they would follow established guidance from expert regulatory authorities such as the FDA. Californians are experiencing the worst wildfire season the state has ever seen, and it isn't over yet. More than 2 million acres have burned. Since mid-August, the state has seen nearly 1,000 fires. Right now, part of the Sierra National Forest is burning due to the Creek Fire. Over the weekend, more than 200 people were rescued by helicopters there.
We've never seen fires like we've seen in Redwood Forest just in the last 3 weeks. We've seen over 100,000 acres of fires burning.
One of the other major fires burning right now is the El Dorado fire in Southern California. It's already scorched more than 10,000 acres and is less than 20% contained. Officials say it started from a gender reveal party. Surveillance videos showed a couple with kids walking to the edge of the El Dorado Ranch Park with a smoke device, lighting it, and then scrambling when the flames grew. Protesters in Rochester, New York have been in the streets every night in the week since body camera footage showed the arrest of Daniel Prude, who later died from what happened during that arrest. Today, Rochester's chief of police said he is stepping down. This comes 3 days after the state's attorney general announced a grand jury to consider evidence in the death of Prude. On March 23rd, Prude's brother called police because the 41-year-old was having a mental health emergency. When officers found him, they covered Prude's head with a spit hood and held him on the ground before he stopped breathing. Prude was declared brain dead a week later.
He never behaved like that before, you know what I mean? And that is what prompted me to call for help, because that never happened. My brother, in all the years of me being in my brother's life, my brother ain't never behaved like that. So all I can say is they cried for help, it went unanswered.
For the last 6 nights, protesters have demanded justice. Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren says their calls have been heard, promising to work on police reform. Last week, Warren suspended 7 officers involved in Prude's death.
We will fully engage with the Race Commission and our Real Rapid Response Team to further improve our response to mental health crises and re-envision our police department.
The Postmaster General is back in the hot seat this week, but this time it doesn't have much to do with his current position. The House Oversight Committee has launched an investigation into Louis DeJoy for alleged campaign finance violations from before his time as Postmaster General. According to the Washington Post, DeJoy allegedly pressured employees at his former company, New Breed Logistics, to donate to Republican candidates he supported and then use company bonuses to reimburse them. Last month, DeJoy testified under oath that he had not reimbursed any executives for donating to the Trump campaign. President Trump told reporters he'd support DeJoy's removal if found guilty of wrongdoing. The Department of Homeland Security wants to expand the kind of biometric data it collects from immigrants, saying it would help the vetting and screening process. But critics of the new proposal says it can have a negative impact on immigrants, opening the door for more surveillance on those communities. Newsy's Ben Shamiso has more.
The Trump administration has put out a new proposal to collect additional data from immigration applicants, including eye scans, voice prints, and DNA. The plan would vastly increase the number of applicants required to submit some of these biometrics. and it may force immigrants in the US to continuously give biological identifiers to the government even after they have obtained their visas.
There are going to be people who are subject to this continuous vetting for the rest of their lives.
Critics say the new vetting proposal establishes a chilling surveillance state for non-citizens, which could deter many from immigrating in the first place.
We are concerned that this is simply an enormous new barrier that they are creating for legal immigrants to discourage immigrants from coming to the United States.
Besides immigrants, the new rule would also impact US citizens who are petitioning for family members. They could be subject to DNA tests to prove the existence of a claimed genetic relationship.
One of the results of this rule will be a decrease in family-based immigration, that petitioners will not be willing to submit for such an invasive biometrics exam just to petition for their relatives.
Department of Homeland Security leaders say leveraging readily available technology to verify the identity of an individual thwarts fraudsters who are not who they claim to be. Currently, the government collects fingerprints, signatures, and photos from applicants as part of an initial background check. Now, DHS wants to use new recognition technologies throughout the application process, not only to verify identities, but also to produce secure documents and manage records. DHS will officially publish the rule in the Federal Register on Friday. The public will have 30 days to comment on it after that. Ben Chamisso, Newsy, Chicago.
When you're back, we'll take you through some of today's safe for work trending topics. If you've been on Twitter today, you know why we're saying that. Trending topics are like a box of chocolates, but since the topics try to outstupid each other on a daily basis, we figured we'd go ahead and pick out the palatable ones and just throw the box away. Here's what's trending. We're not sure if Apple had originally scheduled an upcoming event announcement today, but leakers apparently had other plans. A newly customized logo after the hashtag #AppleEvent sent Twitter users into a frenzy before Apple just came out and said, "Okay, you got us." Some users shared an event invitation for September 15th where Apple is expected to reveal new iPhones and other items. Apple wasn't the only tech company to release some information ahead of schedule today. In a tongue-in-cheek tweet, Xbox said, "Let's make it official," and announced the new Series S console, the smallest Xbox ever, for $299. So to the folks online who just can't mind their own business, we salute you. We usually save the snubs for award season, but soccer fans say they want to talk about this right now. The National Soccer Hall of Fame announced former U.S. men's national team player Carlos Bocanegra as the lone member of the 2020 Hall of Fame class. But fans felt that Hope Solo, one of the greatest, if not the greatest women's goalkeeper in history, was snubbed her first year on the ballot. On the pitch, Solo made a US record 202 appearances in 16 years and twice won the World Cup's Golden Glove Award for being the best goalkeeper in the tournament. But it might have been Solo's off-the-pitch headlines, like an arrest for assault or calling Sweden a bunch of cowards, that affected her standing with voters. Bocanegra will be inducted during a 2021 ceremony in Texas. And Serena Williams is trending after reaching the US Open quarterfinals and becoming the first player to get 100 wins at Arthur Ashe Stadium. Roger Federer is the player in distant second with 77 career wins at Arthur Ashe. I'd be lying if I said this was just about Serena though. This gives us an excuse to heap praise on Alexis Olympia Ohanian Jr., who at 3 also has an impressive game face. Education is a pretty important issue to most Americans, but it's not usually something that pops during presidential campaigns. But with the start of this hybrid school year dominating headlines, education has been a priority during this election cycle. Newsy's Amy Morona spoke to experts about how safely reopening K-12 schools during a pandemic has been top of mind for both Biden and Trump.
Just review our 7 habits.
Historically, education has been a big issue for voters, but it hasn't always gotten much attention during presidential campaigns.
It's mostly seen as a local issue, but presidential elections are usually more about international affairs and defense.
But that may change this year.
It's hard to open the newspaper and not read something on the front page of almost every paper in the country about what schools are doing. Schools have never gotten this much attention before.
The discussion over safely reopening K-12 schools in light of the coronavirus has been a top issue both for President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden.
They think it's going to be good for them politically, so they keep the schools closed. No way. So we're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools.
Mr. President, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you working on this? We need emergency support funding for our schools, and we need it now.
A recent poll found 58% of Americans said education is a very important issue to them.
We're in the midst of reopening both on college campuses and in schools. Everything is super heightened. And that's probably going to continue until Election Day. I think what happens after, though, is really going to tell the tale. The impact of COVID on schools is going to go way beyond that. There's a much longer timeline here.
And while most of the focus right now is on the coronavirus's impact on education, there are also other issues and people contributing to the national conversation. One of them is Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, who has been condemned and sued by teachers' unions, national organizations, and states during her time in office. Both DeVos and the president have championed school choice, which gives families other options outside of traditional public districts, like private or charter schools.
I think that makes the role of the Secretary of Education has a little bit of a spotlight on it more now than it did in the past, just because she is a polarizing figure. The current president has sort of gone out there on the campaign trail and said, if I win my next term, it's going to be all about school choice. Also a very divisive issue.
As for Biden, his education platform includes offering free tuition at public higher education institutions for families making less than $125,000 per year. A nod to former 2020 rival Senator Bernie Sanders calls for free college. He's also married to an educator. Jill Biden kicked off a speaking tour of schools in 8 battleground states earlier this month. Amy Morona, Newsy, Washington.
I'm going to go move around a bit so the automatic lights know that a human is still in here.
As the coronavirus has quickly spread across the world,
a freeze on travel has the potential to reshape why people fly.
This halt in traditional entertainment highlights how viewers and creators are coping together.
Healthcare systems in the U.S. will need 3.5 billion masks.
The economic damage looks very different on either side of the Atlantic.
There are only about 117,000 beds nationwide.
When can we get back to normal?
California wildfires have burned more than 2 million acres this year, which is a new record for a state that is blanketed by smoke. But California isn't the only state dealing with wildfires that are fueled by extreme heat and high winds. And during a pandemic with a virus that affects the respiratory system, poor air quality can have a disastrous effect on people with allergies and/or asthma. Newsy's Lindsay Thies explains.
Add it to the list of COVID-19 risk factors. Wildfires. Some early research shows more coronavirus cases and more deaths in areas with poor air quality. It's causing some major concerns for people like Laura Palazzo in Thornton, Colorado.
This air purifier runs 24 hours a day.
She deals with allergies and asthma each day.
The air quality and the wildfire has impacted that greatly. Usually I take a hit off my inhaler once at night just to kind of get through the night. But now I'm on 2 different steroids and I use my rescue inhaler at least 8 times a day.
ER Doc Katie Sprinkle says recent wildfires have led to an increase in patients with symptoms like cough, wheezing and shortness of breath, chest pain and dry eyes. And it's not just allergies and asthma. Wildfire can be harmful for those recovering from COVID-19.
There's also some studies coming out saying that in areas with higher levels of air pollution, we see more COVID cases and more deaths. That said, those studies aren't peer-reviewed yet.
Sprinkle says that wildfire smoke exposure increases your susceptibility to viruses too,
meaning those exposed are at higher risk of getting COVID-19. Wildfire seasons are lasting longer, too. California-based wildfire researcher Keith Bine tells Newsy this year's season is off to an early start.
We've been saying it for a while, look for this to come. Increased fire activity, a quicker start to the fire season, a longer fire season, more intense fires.
Longer term smoke exposure, meaning breathing in smoke for weeks or even months, certainly raises the risk of lung damage and can contribute to cardiovascular disease risk also.
Doctors say this complicates things more for patients like Laura. So much COVID-19 guidance has encouraged opening windows or spending time outside. But when the air quality is poor, with a lot of particulate matter from wildfire smoke, that's not ideal.
Most of the time I just have to stay inside and make sure I'm medicated.
One resource that helps, airnow.gov. It's a federal website. You type in your zip code and you get air quality data for your location, plus recommendations on things like being outside versus inside and what at-risk populations should do. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
Since we're all second screening, my phone is in my lap. Feel free to drop us a line on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. This will show my parents that I'm not just speaking into the void every night. Nearly 100 years ago, white rioters in Tulsa, Oklahoma looted and burned Greenwood, an affluent black community within the city. Hundreds of homes and businesses were destroyed. More than 800 people were treated for injuries, and historians believe nearly 300 people died, although earlier reports put that number much, much lower. Now, survivors and their families are suing Tulsa for reparations. Newsy's Therese Garnier explains what they hope to gain from this lawsuit.
Demario Simmons is representing 9 families in a lawsuit filed against Tulsa, Oklahoma, to, quote, repair the damage caused by the 1921 massacre that killed hundreds of black citizens and destroyed 40 blocks of Greenwood, an area also known as Black Wall Street. Raven Maggio's great-grandfather survived the massacre.
My great-grandfather came in very politically driven because he recognized that at that time all blacks were voting Republican across the line because Lincoln had freed the slaves, but that Republicans were voting for the grandfather clause that was making it very hard for blacks to vote.
She and her family are parties in the lawsuit, which charges that the National Guard helped carry out brutal attacks against black people, a charge the Guard denies, adding they prevented further attacks on black Tulsans.
Black people were being attacked, being murdered, having their property looted, their houses burned, and killed in the streets. And so that for the National Guard to make a statement like that shows us that they have not only have they not wanted to provide a remedy for what they did, they won't even accept the facts that they created the problem.
How do you even begin to calculate reparations for not only what happened that night, but the ripple effect it has had for decades?
We don't know what the number is right now, right? And that's why this lawsuit is important, because there has never been a total and complete accounting for what exactly was lost. And that's why we want this lawsuit to move forward so we can bring in our experts, our economists, our insurance experts who can come and tell us, okay, what exactly was lost? What is the exact value of that today? And what should be paid to abate the nuisance or fix the problem.
Simmons says this lawsuit will be successful compared to a 2005 appeal, which also sought reparations but was rejected by the Supreme Court. In this case, he's attempting to use the state's public nuisance law.
Basically, the theory is you create a nuisance, you're responsible to, the legal term is to abate it or to fix it. And until you fix it or abate the nuisance, you are responsible for it. And there's no question that a nuisance was created in 1921.
Simmons says he expects the state to file a motion to dismiss. And when they do,
I won't be going anywhere that my great-grandfather didn't go, and he didn't go anywhere till he hit his grave.
Therese Garnier, Newsy, Washington.
Protests for racial justice have been ongoing for more than 100 days in Portland, Oregon. If you remember, that was around the time protesters hit the streets following the police killing of George Floyd. While demonstrators in Portland demand change, a network of churches are working simultaneously to provide health and violence prevention services to the local community. National reporter Amanda Brandeis has more.
Downtown buildings turned into a canvas tell a story of anger and grief.
The voices of the young people are being heard and they are speaking out.
It paints a story of history being repeated, yet hope still remains.
We're getting in good trouble.
Leslie Williams spent 20 years building up and believing in the young people she serves.
Let them know that you really care about them and being your authentic self, because kids know.
Through her church's nonprofit, Highland Haven, she wanted to bring wraparound services to families most at risk, expanding mental health services and creating youth violence prevention programs.
Biggest thing for me was health. I've come from a family of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and that's not talked about in our community. It's not talked about in our culture.
With church being the anchor for many families, the women wanted change to begin here, giving the congregation access to preventative services like cholesterol checks and blood pressure screenings.
You never know how sick you are because it becomes your normal until you go get checked out.
And rather make the change inside her one church in Portland, Oregon, Leslie helped build a network of churches now preaching the same principles.
You were what we needed because it was in our heart to do it, but we didn't know where to start.
Now over 2,500 people hear the message every week across the county, learning ways to improve their physical health, manage their mental health, and how to cope with the traumas of racial injustice.
We're going to Zoom and talk about the disparities that are going on in our community, how it is affecting our youth. We got to wrap around our arms around the youth.
Leslie's effort to create a network of churches earned her an honor from the CDC, an award celebrating those making tangible strides in achieving health equity.
Inspirational, humbling.
While the pandemic has created obstacles in their mission, it's also a reminder of how vital the work is.
We always say that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, this village of churches decided we're going to tackle this for our community, and that was the greatest gift.
In Portland, Oregon, I'm Amanda Brandeis reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be doing this show again tomorrow, same time, same place, and again in front of an empty newsroom. Stay tuned for more top stories from Newsy.